welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew, Keith Johnson.
After watching these shows, I'm not sure if I am Keith Johnson.
And Veronica Dashel.
Hi.
And welcome back. We're here back again to talk about episodes 6 through 10 from the second season of Star Trek Prodigy. But first, I've got a couple of quick Star Trek news items I wanted to hit. We've got 5 episodes to talk about tonight in an hour, so I'm going to hit these very quickly. But we've got another casting announcement from Starfleet Academy. And it says Starfleet Academy series casts Carice Brooks, Bella Shepard, and George Hawkins. Now, I'm not familiar with any of these actors, but they all appear to be young people, so I'm guessing that they're going to be the cadets, some of the cadets. So, exciting. I'm happy for them. This is going to be a big step for them. They don't know it, but they're going to be Trek people for the rest of their lives.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember all the guys from the show Enterprise. They said that everybody asked them, "Were you ready for what you're going to get when you join the show?" And then, of course, Enterprise got canceled after 4 seasons instead of what everybody thought was 7. But it's like you said, it's a Star Trek show. So, yes, they've been tied to that show forever.
Yeah.
So
it must be kind of strange to be like 20 years old and know what the first line of your obituary is going to be. But congratulations to them. I'm looking forward to seeing more of them and getting to know them as actors.
Same here.
Have to bring to the Star Trek universe. Additionally, a website called productionlist.com, which tracks, it's like an industry website, has listed a film called Star Trek Origins as in development and pre-production. Last updated was July 8th, 2024. It says the shoot date is December the 31st, 2024. Locations in London and Los Angeles. Plot summary, an origin story of the Galactic Federation that would feature a new cast taking place decades before the original 2009 Star Trek film. And the cast and crew, Toby Haynes as a director, J.J. Abrams as producer, and Seth Grahame-Smith as producer. And this is the film that we've talked about before. It's like a new origin story for Star Trek that's supposed to be set. I'm guessing post First Contact. They're really banking on the 2009 film as far as marketing. I don't know. It rubs me every time when they say the original 2009 Star Trek movie.
Yes.
No.
Yeah. So if it's before the founding of the Federation, then it's not the quote unquote, well, I call it the Abrams verse, right? Because that didn't diverge at that point. Is it?
I would think that, but also the Abrams verse, Khan was a white Englishman. So who knows? It could just be that the Kelvin verse is just different all the way through. So that it could just be marketing because the 2009 movie was the most popular recent Star Trek movie. Mm-hmm. But also it could just be that they intend to just do something totally different with Star Trek and call it the Kelvin verse and have their own origin and First Contact and stuff like that. We don't know yet.
They could have said decades before the groundbreaking Star Trek series Discovery.
True. Yeah, that's true.
But they're trying to tie it in with the films, with the successful films.
Yeah.
What they want is the people who got excited, like the regular people who went to see Star Trek in 2009, to care again now, 15 years later.
They need to get new fans to care.
That's what they're going for.
No, they need to not get the fans that cared just for the movie before.
All right. Well, one more, and this is from Variety, and David Ellison said as chairman and CEO, Jeff Shell as president of Paramount, Sherry Redstone to sell family empire to Skydance Media, an $8 billion deal. So Paramount has come to an agreement with Skydance, and I guess at this point they're just waiting for like the regulatory agencies to sign off on it. They've got to make sure that they're not too big of a monopoly and that kind of thing. But it looks like Skydance is going to purchase Paramount.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess they're getting it for $8 billion, so they outbid me. By a hair.
Your $8 didn't go for
I was up to $30. You're not following our group. I was going to throw $30 in to buy Paramount.
I'm curious what's going to come out of this. I know Ellison is the son of Oracle co-founder Larry Ellison, who one of his biggest claims to fame was he basically would brag every year about whether he was or not richer than Gates.
Oh,
and but I guess he's trying to establish himself. I just don't know what this means. That franchise, the ownership has been all over the place. I don't know what this means for the future of streaming or movies or frankly anything.
Right. Now, Skydance was involved with the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. They were a production partner on that. And I'm told that the Skydance guy is a Trekkie. Now, what that means, I don't know.
Right.
Now, usually, though, when someone buys a big asset, like in this case, Paramount, they intend to make money off it. You're not going to buy Paramount and then let all the most popular Paramount properties sit in the vault.
One would hope.
Right? Like the plan would be to buy it for $8 billion and make many more billions of dollars back. Right.
Yeah,
so I would expect that the big Paramount franchises, it's kind of like when Disney bought Star Wars and now there's just like Star Wars shows all the time.
Yeah.
You know, they bought Marvel and there's Marvel shows all the time, maybe to the detriment. Like, yeah, that's debatable. But I mean, hopefully this means more Star Trek, but also hopefully it means good Star Trek.
It's funny. On a quick related note, my personal opinion, hated CEO Zaslav from the Warner Brothers Discovery thing recently said that when somebody asked him who he'd vote for in the election, he said he would vote for whomever makes it easier for companies to merge because mergers are the future. And I guess I guess he would support something like this. So maybe in 20 years, there'll be one giant company.
It makes me think of Demolition Man, where he went to the future and like Taco Bell had won the fast food wars, and now everything was just Taco Bell. All right, well, let's talk about Prodigy.
Yeah.
So tonight we're talking about the episodes 6 through 10 from Star Trek Prodigy season 2, and I have a list of those episodes because I have a cheat sheet. Imposter Syndrome, The Fast and the Curious, Is There in Beauty No Truth, and the Devourer of All Things, parts 1 and 2. And if you're just joining us, we have only watched up through the Devourer of All Things part 2. So there will be no spoilers beyond the Devourer of Things part 2 from us and hopefully from anyone in the chat. So if you're in the chat, please
don't say anything. Don't say, well, this person's not in it.
Or you won't believe who shows up in episode 12. You know, like we're just trying to keep this spoiler free and just enjoy talking about the episodes as we watch them.
Yes. So when I say this is not as good as Deep Space Nine, don't prove me wrong by spoiling it.
All right. We've got a couple of comments I want to hit before we dive into it.
Cool.
Tiger Blade 2002 is with us and says, hey.
What's up, Wayne?
Mr. Matt Sweatman is here and also says hello.
Hey, Matt.
And then Matt Sweatman followed it up with, I believe that Skydance does want the Trek property, so that is hopeful at least. And I agree. Irish Banshee 1974 is in the chat and says, we've only seen up through episode 10 as well.
Cool.
Excellent.
You have more restraint than I want to have. Yeah. I threatened to quit the podcast.
Yeah, we got to episode 10 and Veronica was like, next one. And I was like, no, that's all we can watch until next Thursday. And she was like, I quit the podcast.
I want to watch more.
I know.
What we're going to do after Chuck finishes editing the podcast and I post it.
We're going to watch the next one and find out what happens next. It's tough. I've had to now mute the official Star Trek Facebook page because, well, they shared an image from this batch of episodes, which was Zero's new body. And it was like, meet Zero's new body. And I was like, well, I'm glad I already watched that. Yeah. But I don't know how quickly they're going to be posting things like that. So I'm just, by the end of this, I will have muted all social media. And it'll just be me talking to myself. And Matt Sweatman concurs and says, I was spoiled on 2 things from episodes 6 to 10 on social media. Yeah, everyone wants to be firsties. Yeah. I kind of hate this dropping a whole season at a time. I like,
me too.
Old. I like watching an episode, think about it, speculate what's going to happen next.
Me too.
And not everyone be in a race. Like the people who were off that day just binge the whole show and then just brag to the internet that they've seen it all. You know, I like the week by week. So. But I'm an old man, so what do I know?
That's funny you say that because I'm the same way. I rarely binge anything. And I tell you, anytime I binge anything that's good, I go back to your point and watch it again because I feel like it's like eating a steak dinner too fast. And so if I binge 3 or 4 episodes of anything, I was like, well, I need to go see that again because I didn't have time to think about it, to let it percolate.
Or we'll binge a show in a couple days if they can drop it on Netflix or something. And then 2 years later, the next season will come out. I'll be like, oh, yeah, I remember that show. What was that about?
Yes. So you go back and watch some of it again.
Right.
Like, it's the next day and we're like, wait, now there's 10 seasons? What?
Right. It does seem that way. Well, let's talk about these episodes. We're 10 minutes in and people are getting mad at us. I mean, obviously the episode 9 and 10 are big ones.
Yes.
So do we want to talk about some of what happened before that, before we get to that? Now, one thing we didn't talk much about last week.
Also, Red alert! Spoilers.
Yes, spoilers for episodes 6 through 10 of Star Trek Prodigy season 2. One thing we didn't talk about much last week was the portrayal of the Doctor. The Doctor's back on television
Yeah.
after decades. I mean, how have we thought about the portrayal of the EMH in these episodes?
I've enjoyed it. He seems very much in his character, and still seems very much like the Doctor. And I've loved some of the mistakes he's made because he is the Doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that his character. It's funny whenever I watch Star Trek, whether it's this or possible futures of Voyager talking about such things. It's always funny because sometimes I'm wondering, like, why don't they just stay on Earth? So it's funny the Doctor is still on a starship, and I would kind of think he'd want to be on Earth, but I guess that's the whole point of it. So I was first surprised to see him there, but I love it. It's still Robert Picardo. You can hear his voice is older. Its voice is a little weaker than it used to be. But it's still him, and boy, they're still they're contriving to find the I'm a doctor, not a thing.
Oh yeah,
they're laying that on a little thick.
Yeah,
yes, they
he
are.
would have those from time to time, but not usually
Right.
like 3 or 4 of them in 10 episodes time.
Yeah, or 3 or 4, 10 times in 3 or 4 episodes.
Okay. I don't know what you said. But let's talk about some of our new crew. I mean, what did we think about the hologram deal?
My notes pretty much, this is truth. My notes said for the first 2 episodes, 6 and 7, they were kind of underwhelming to me. They were just okay. And they actually felt a little more like they were back to kind of appealing to young people and just kind of almost slapstick. Not a slapstick, that's not a fair thing, but kind of standard adventure, the Imposter Syndrome and that. And then the Fast and the Curious, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I thought it was fine, but I've seen that before. Now what they did with the Gwen hologram left as the thing got better, then it was cool. But the first one was the whole mistaken identity. It was fine, but I've seen that so much in science fiction. It really didn't, and it didn't hold my interest very much. Even the personality swaps.
Yeah. And this is not really a comment, guys, on what the show is, but more what I had hoped for and was wanting to see was that they really haven't had any in the first 10 episodes of these characters just like trying to be Starfleet and learning Starfleet things.
Yeah.
Like from the jump, they're just running around and stealing ships and beaming off and pulling hijinks. Like there has never been a point where Dial is trying to get through a shift. Where he's having to
not
take
even
orders.
getting through a book.
Right. He's not going on an away mission and having to listen to someone's orders. He's not having to like fix something on the ship. It's immediately they just run rampant on this ship. And I mentioned this last week, but Starfleet ships need to be a little stricter on their cadets. You can't just, or their trainees, you can't just let them run wild and steal your experimental ship twice.
So that was the thing. So with the Imposter Syndrome, it was fine. It felt a little more toward the kids or standard science fiction. And the only thing that I got up that was kind of cool is I thought it was cool that Rock and her hologram duplicate basically were reasonable. Everybody else is like, arrogance and this and that and ego. And they were like, hey, we need to get out of this. And so they came. I thought that was cool and very consistent with her character because she's, to your point, Charles, she's trying to be Starfleet. I watched last week's, the last episode of our block from last week. And I love it when she's like, I'm not hearing you. You're trying to do something illegal. We're not doing this anymore. And they're like, come on, Rock, you want to join us? She goes, no, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Although I do think it's kind of weird that she made holograms so incredibly like them that they were them. And they're like, hey, all we asked you were this. She said something like, well, don't blame me for getting an A++ or whatever.
Yeah.
That does seem very Star Trek, where you're like, make duplicates of us. And the duplicates are so good that they think they're them.
Yeah.
And I liked it when I just forgot the little Telluride guy's name.
Jenko?
When Jenkum Pog was having an existential crisis.
Yeah.
Like, am I?
That was great.
All right, let's grab a few comments real quick. In regards to what we're talking about binging, Tiger Blade 2002 said, even if I did watch a whole series, I would remember it anyway. The advantage of being old and senile.
I think he meant wouldn't.
Would, yeah. And then Matt replied, hey, Wayne, we're not old. We're well seasoned. Matt said, I said the Doctor is my favorite Voyager character, and he's very good here also.
Agreed, Matt.
And Irish Banshee 1974 says Rock Talk is the only one who was following the rules until she fully got roped in on the adventure.
Yep.
And yeah, and Kimberly Ann Hart is with us in the chat as well. Hey, Kimberly, we see you. And I just want to remind people, if you've seen the whole season, let's lay off speculation and things, so we don't want to accidentally spoil people.
Don't even mention who's not there,
right?
Please,
because we don't know what happens in episode 11 through 20. I mean, I like the little adventures. I like the crew. I would have liked to have seen more of them trying to fit in Starfleet and showing that they actually do want to be Starfleet officers, not that they immediately just run off and steal ships. Imposter Syndrome was fun. The Fast and the Curious, I thought, was fun.
Yeah, it was cute. I liked it a lot.
They keep trying to make the Kazon cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was just okay to me too. It didn't do a lot for me because I mean maybe it's me, but then I started thinking about the pod race in Star Wars.
Right. Yeah, it's just a
which I didn't care for.
It reminded me of one of the Voyager episodes where Tom Paris had to be in a race with this alien species, or wanted to be in a race with this alien species. Yeah, that's what it reminded me of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean it was also fun. They both felt kind of throwback to me. They felt almost more like you got from the first season when they were just having fun adventures. And I was like you, Charles. One point I wrote, man, I really miss Janeway and the Starfleet crew and the starship. Other than this,
right? Yeah. I mean, what do you think about them stealing the Infinity again?
Here's the thing, like you know. Going ahead and giving away the lead. The stuff is starting to pay off, at least in terms of the drama and making me curious. But it really feels a little contrived. As you said, they just got through all this stealing stuff and running around orders, and maybe that's the point. But doing it again, I couldn't help but sometimes going, if you kind of really told Janeway what was going on, she might. Because let's face it, Janeway has broken the rules more than once, and she's game. So the whole thing, it felt contrived. It's like the whole stealing the ship, we got to run off and be rogues again.
Yeah,
it's okay.
I feel like that was also largely Dao wanting to be captainy again and not just sit around and learn things and be told what to do and whatnot. He got used to being the captain and running around and saving the universe and doing good deeds.
Well, is that his arc? Is he supposed to learn that he needs the guidance and the structure in order to join Starfleet? Because you ultimately, to be in Starfleet, you do have to start off doing what people tell you to do.
Yeah,
right.
You don't join up and like I'm going to sign up to be captain.
Yeah,
right.
And they give. I mean, okay, Star Trek 2009, that kind of did that, but
right.
Generally, you start off as an ensign and you have to learn what to do and do the crappy jobs and work your way up and show that you have the capabilities. I mean, is that his arc, or do you think his arc is going to be learning that he doesn't want to be in Starfleet after all?
I think he's going to learn that he doesn't want to be in Starfleet after all.
There's sorry.
All the others seem to at least, I mean, especially Rock Talk, but Jingapog and Zero and everyone seem to be putting effort in that first little snippet at the beginning of episode 1. And Dao seems to be the only one who had no interest in that at all whatsoever. Right. Like he wasn't trying even a little bit.
Yeah, and then there was that really strange thing where he peeked into the time stream.
Yeah,
and he was he said something like he thought the chair was right for him, but was he not? What is it not? Is he giving up command? What does that mean? I don't know.
I feel like it's him giving up his spot in Starfleet to give it to Gwen.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, but it's not like there's one captaincy available in Starfleet and they're competing for it.
Yeah, and that honestly might even be a specific mission where she's better in that moment than him giving up his career.
Yeah,
but I agree with you, Charles. And it's funny that when you reference the Abrams verse track, 2009 track, because as you say, the one thing about Chris Pine's Kirk is he came in like Dahl, but even him throughout the movies, he had to learn that responsibility that he didn't have at first. You can't bluff your way through everything. And so maybe Dahl will learn that. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. We got a few comments here from Mr. Matt Sweatman, who says, it feels like the show needs the gang in their own ship to have them be the driver of events. and then said it was just one spot for Wesley and Next Gen. Yeah, it does feel like they feel the need to put the characters like on their own. It's almost like they immediately regretted having them join up the Starfleet thing at the end of season 1. And they were like, well, how do we get out of this? Because we can't have these characters just being lower deckers on a Starfleet ship. They've got to run off and be wild and have their own adventures. And I mean, I would have been, they're not targeting a 43-year-old Star Trek nerd, you know, but I, as a 43-year-old Star Trek nerd, would have liked to have seen them having to be in Starfleet.
Me too. Yeah. Because, you know, Star Trek, they always break the weird rules. I was on a Facebook post today, and then, you know, people are always posting stuff from the old stuff, and they were basically saying, why was Kirk demoted to captain instead of an admiral? So people, the next, you know, 268 people had chimed in on that. But to what you're saying, then, same thing, Charles, is you could still have them be kind of a group of rebels, but within a Starfleet ship. You know, they could still find ways to do stuff. So I agree with you. Kind of contriving them to still yet another ship, it felt a little stale to me. And for me, it's funny you said that. My notes said, this is not the direction I wanted them to go. Do they have to do this again? Still fun. But honestly, the first two, I was like, man, am I going to really like this new, what I guess I call ARC, this group of 5? But as we'll get to the later, yeah, it got better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about the Kazon? Do you think the Kazon are cool now?
No.
Are they still the dollar Klingons?
Yeah, they just don't work for me. I mean, they just don't work. They don't seem to know what to do with that.
And then that evil computer.
Yeah, where did that come from? That was another one. It almost felt like somebody took that out of a drawer. These first 2 episodes, like, you know, here's a plot we got out of a drawer. I didn't get where that came from because it kind of sort of didn't really go anywhere. It was really kind of old school, you know, throwaway Star Trek.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into the 3rd episode. Yeah. There in Beauty, No Truth.
I love the twist on that classic title.
Yes.
Love
that. It was so great.
Yeah. Yes. Where we were talking about it last week that Zero's arc seems to be longing for having a corporeal form because it's Star Trek, so the aliens want to be more like us.
Yeah.
Yes. Because we talked about why would you necessarily want to be corporeal? Because you might have abilities that we don't have. Well, he does. Or I'm sorry, they do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But they got the opportunity to have a corporeal form on this planet where there's all these corporeal. Of course, there's a twist because it's a Star Trek episode.
Yes.
Okay. So with the thing where if they leave, the body degenerates. I feel like it's going to be like normal humanoid lifespan type degenerate.
Like the twist is like, well, in only 90 years, you will have died of old age.
Yeah. And then it's not that Zero will have died, it's the body will have died because Zero will still be there.
Yeah. I don't think this is going to be a permanent change.
Thanks not.
I think it's going to be like when Odo became a solid.
So at some point Zero will go back.
Right. Something will happen where Zero will choose to be non-corporeal and decide that they like to be non-corporeal, you know?
Right.
But I think this is just an arc within the season. But I mean, it's compelling.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the story and watching Zero experience things and the way that they celebrate the senses and everything. I thought that was fascinating.
It was funny because, as I said, the first 2 episodes were so incredibly bland to me that this one caught me off guard with how much depth was in that episode. Because as we're saying, first off, as I've had to remind myself a couple times, Zero is they, not he or she. And so this is all about such things as you're not gendered and so forth. But Charles, you make a good point. At this point, they're kind of saying it's better to be like us, you know, bipedal, bilateral humanoids than to have what is basically an energy body. I don't think they're saying that, but it's a very interesting tack they took because they're like tasting and hearing and all this other stuff is better than their original forms. And I thought that was very interesting. But then, as you say, maybe something's going to happen. Maybe, and what's the Vulcan girl's name? I can't believe I can't remember her name.
Majel.
Majel. Good God, Majel. I can't remember Majel. That's the second week in a row I can't remember Majel. But as you said, maybe something happened with Zero will have to jump in front of a phaser blast. Or maybe there's some kind of weird timey-wimey or wormhole where only Zero's full energies can happen. So Zero will have to let their body disintegrate. But I wonder, so based on what if they're going to go back to saying it doesn't matter what form you're in, because that's kind of the point of Zero. It doesn't matter if you have a gender or something. So there's potential for a really interesting story with that, as silly as it sounds.
Yeah, it kind of makes me long though for I mean, if you watch the new Battlestar Galactica, I almost said Al Calavici because I just blanked on his real name, but Dean Stockwell's character has this great speech about how he could be, seeing radiation and tasting stardust and things like that, but he's trapped in this terrible humanoid body for no reason because he's an artificial life form. He could be anything.
Right.
And it kind of makes me long for that. I hope that Zero, over the course of these adventures, will get to experience the different sensations of being human, but then decide that they want to be a Medusan. They want to be who they are.
Right.
Kind of the grass isn't always greener on the other side kind of a thing.
Yeah. And thinking about Zero in a body, I cannot help but go back to Is There in Truth No Beauty with Spock. You remember when Ambassador Carlos got in Spock's body, he gave that really cool little monologue where he said something to the effect of how alone you are, how separate you are from each other, because in a body, you can't experience this unity with others like he can't, Carlos could as a Medusan.
Yeah.
And then I remember he even talked about these things you have, these feelings, these emotions you call love. Are any of you its master? Right. I thought that was really cool. So I wonder if something like that's going to happen with Zero. That was surprisingly deep and it has a lot of potential. And it kind of caught me off guard.
Yeah, I think it was Ambassador Carlos, if I'm remembering correctly.
Carlos, you always get that name wrong.
Yeah. Well, let's grab a few comments. Tiger Blade 2002 says, off the top of my head, I can't recall any real life situation to explain Kirk's demotion. However, I have no problem with it. Putting someone where they can perform at their best makes sense to me.
And Wayne, as a Marine, would know these things.
Right. Irish Banshee 1974 says, yeah, I can't see Zero not wanting to be in a body anymore after a while. They did make several comments about how things felt as far as physical sensations or feelings. It may overwhelm them. And then Tiger Blade 2002 says, P.S. Until this season, I hadn't realized Zero was male. And yeah, Zero, it doesn't have a gender on the show, and that'll be interesting because it's a little bit of a cop out to have a non-gendered character who's a non-corporeal life form.
Yeah.
But I think it's good using the pronoun they and so forth in a kid's show, getting people more accustomed to it. But it's interesting now. I'm interested to see if that continues now that Zero is in a physical body. If they continue with the they them, or if they try to give Zero a gender.
Yeah. Yeah, was I the only one who seeing Zero embracing Majel immediately thought of Saru and
Tarina?
Tarina?
Yeah.
Because you got this tall, slim alien and then the shorter boy.
I didn't
it was
think
almost
about
the same.
that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I didn't think about that either. That's a good point. Well, yeah, I mean, what do we think of these first 3 episodes as a whole before we get into the big ones?
The first 2 were good. I really enjoyed the third one.
Yeah, the first 2 to me were throwaway, and I've already forgotten much of what happened. But I really enjoyed the third. And the one thing I'll say real quick about the third one that caught me off guard is when they did the thing. And Charles, you said several times it's Star Trek and it's sci-fi, right? Because you remember when Zero walks away, they said, "But you didn't tell him everything."
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh no, they're evil."
Yeah.
And it turns out they weren't.
Yeah. Well, they're just gonna let them be chased around by a giant flying manta ray.
But they can ride around in its mouth.
True.
Yeah. That was pretty cool.
Or be trapped in there for eternity.
Yeah, I thought that was a fun episode. It's a cool looking planet, interesting sci-fi premise. I thought it was good. Good.
And that gave me shades of Star Trek Insurrection, where you have some kind of magical dust or something in the sky that's only in that area. Because remember in Insurrection, they were only immortal if they stayed in that particular area. And so the fact that they said if they leave, then their bodies would disintegrate, which also, again, if you talk about the show it's based on, and Is There in Truth No Beauty, the companion couldn't leave the planetoid where it was formed because the companion would die after leaving its metamorphosis. Oh, there I go again. I'm all over the map. Charles' favorite show.
I know. Well, not favorite, but I like it. Well, before we get into the final 2 episodes of this block, the 2-parter, The Devourer of All Things, let's play a quick promo for about 30 seconds, and then we'll be right back. So stay right there. Look up, look down, look out. Here come the monkeys.
Mickey,
David,
Mike,
Peter.
We're talking about them in Monkeying Around. That's right. Monkeying Around has everything, including
interviews,
episode reviews,
album discussions,
and other incredible surprises.
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
All right, The Devourer of All Things, parts 1 and 2. This is a big one.
Yeah, it was.
Yes, and full of surprises.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So what did you think when, first off, at what point did you catch something was going on? Like, I got excited when I saw that vault door. And I was like, a vault door? That looks like the vault door. You know?
I wrote that in my notes too. I was like, hey, wait a minute. Is that what I think it is?
Yeah. Because there are a few references here going on. One being to Assignment Earth, which was, it's a very famous episode.
Right.
And then also, I mean, Wesley Crusher came popping out.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, jumping ahead to conclusions, I did say Wesley Crusher as the kind of manic, kind of absent-minded, nutty professor type he was playing was the best use of Will Wheaton, because I did not care for his appearance in Picard because it was wasted. Right. But man, this is just Will Wheaton, and it worked. I mean, in the middle of a universal crisis, he's like, I don't know why mango juice isn't more of a thing or whatever it was. It was great.
Well, hang on that note, let's show this background here to everybody.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I love that they picked up on the, like, in Picard season 2, they sort of tied in the travelers with the supervisors, like the Gary 7 type supervisors and so forth. They sort of tied all that stuff in together. And if you remember, like the not Laris character who looked like Laris, was a Romulan agent for the supervisors who was working on Earth and had some very Gary 7-ish things going on. So I love that they continued that this sort of builds that out more, and you find out more about the supervisors, and you've got this very Gary 7 looking office that's not actually Gary 7's office. It's on this planet, but I thought it was great.
It even had the Beta 9 computer from Gary 7 that was also the console for M5 and all kinds of other stuff. So that was really cool. But I thought Wesley worked, and he kept babbling, and he was all over the map, and he was hyper. It was Will Wheaton, and it worked. It worked this time. It really worked for me.
Yeah, they kind of made a running gag about the sweaters, that he's like, usually obsessed with sweaters.
Right.
Our friend Bill Lamond has joined us in the chat. Hey, Bill.
Hey,
we
Bill.
had a comment from Matt Sweatman, said, did you notice both two-parters so far had different writers for parts 1 and 2?
I didn't. I did not notice that, Matt.
Matt also said Wesley was the other thing I was spoiled on. The first Zero's body.
Man, I would have hated to have been spoiled on Wesley.
Yeah.
Irish Banshee 1974 says, I loved that room so much.
That's our living room goal.
Right. Matt Switman says, the whole thing and retro feel of the room reminded me of the Loki TV show. True. And Irish Banshee 1974 says, I definitely feel like a little fangirl when Wesley came out from the fall. And that's kind of the fun. Because of this is Wesley. He's not even Will Wheaton's current age. This is Wesley, like mid-30s. Like if you're going by the Star Trek timeline, like this is like, but 2386-ish, right? This is only like 7 years after Nemesis. So he wouldn't even be like 50-something-year-old Wesley Crusher. And he doesn't look it. He looks younger than that to me.
Yeah.
I love the way that his character ended up going and developing into especially because he's so involved in time now. And so everything is just all happening at once and simultaneously has not happened yet. So his brain's a little scattered and all over the place. So I thought that came across very well. I mean, of course, that was like 100% just Will Wheaton being Will Wheaton. But I thought it worked really well for the character.
Well, and he had that.
It did.
And he had that big scene where he mentioned the mirror universe, the Kelvin timeline, the mycelial network. Like, oh, you're not supposed to know about that.
That was great.
I thought it was fun. Really cool. And I think it was a really good use of it. Is consistent with what happened in Picard season 2, but it builds it out more. And I think this is a better use of all that material. But I'll be interested after watching this to go back and see Picard season 2 again to see how it holds up.
Yeah, let me know. I like too that like you said, Veronica, that's just Will Wheaton. But I like when they do little things to make you realize people are attached to something. But I got to paraphrase, but he basically says something like, "My mother lives in this universe. I'm saving this one." I just thought that was kind of cool because one thing Gates McFadden has said about Wesley Crusher on the show, and frankly, and what they did even with Picard, she's like she never felt like they really connected her to Wesley like she wanted to. Because it was the time and who was running the shows, but she always felt that Jean-Luc Picard was actually connected to Wesley more than his own mother. And so I just like at least hear him even say that, "Hey, my mother is in this universe. I'm saving this one." So I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. Anytime Wesley needed advice, he would go to Riker or Picard or Geordi or Guinan, but usually he was turning to the men because they're sort of playing off that trope that he's a boy who's fatherless and they're sort of become the surrogate father figures to him on the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would have been great to see him going to Beverly for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We had a few comments here. Master Matt Sweatman says, when he popped out, I thought for a second that O'Connor was back.
Matt, so did I.
I did not see O'Connor at all.
I did. That's amazing.
He does look a little O'Connor-ish, and it's kind of fitting, like, if you watch The Outrageous O'Connor, that like Wesley and O'Connor would end up looking kind of the same because he's, he kind of was looking up to O'Connor in that episode.
I can't believe that. He thought that too.
Irish Banshee 1974 says Wesley had some gray hair, and since time is wibbly wobbly, who knows what age he really is. This is true, but he doesn't have as much gray hair as Will Wheaton currently does. I didn't.
Yeah.
And Mr. Matt Sweatman says, well, you slap your kid, he's going to pull away. Talking about Beverly.
Last night, right? Was it last night or the night before?
I don't know what you're talking about.
The Sweatman's TNG watch of the TNG episode, Sarek.
Okay.
And I think Beverly slapped Wesley Crusher because everybody's emotions were being jacked up because Sarek couldn't control, and they got into an argument. Did she slap him? So I think that's what he's talking about.
I mean, who hasn't wanted to slap Wesley?
Me.
Well, what do we think about these the Devourer of All Things? What do we think about these creatures that are coming through the universe?
They're too powerful, and I don't like them.
Okay.
The Loom.
They kind of reminded me of there's a Doctor Who episode called Father's Day where they go back to when Rose's dad got killed and they changed time.
Yeah.
Which instead of having any like real the what happens as a result of that is that monsters come through, and that's why you're not supposed to change history because monsters will come through and eat you.
That was a powerful episode of Doctor Who. I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, but it wasn't so much as dealing with the consequences of changing time, because the consequences of changing time that episode are that like space dragons come after you.
Right. Yeah.
And this is kind of that way, but I did enjoy seeing and it's kind of random, but like all of a sudden Janeway was in her like gray tank top.
yeah, I wrote that. We were thinking alike.
Great.
I wrote that too. Like, what was that about? That's almost like Kirk ripping the shirt back in the day. So I was like, what?
Yeah, that makes me think of the episode, where that macro virus. That's to me. I remember that as being the big episode where she was like action Janeway.
Yes. Yeah.
So Irish Banshee 1974 says we said the same thing about Father's Day. And Bill Lamont says, I don't want to slap Wesley. I don't understand the hate.
Me neither, Bill.
Okay.
Me neither.
Okay.
Another, when you talked about that, Charles, about creatures that basically either make sure you don't jack with the timeline or just get you because you do. The TV series The Flash also had that trope.
Okay.
When Barry was dealing with the Reverse Flash, the guy who wore yellow, one of the things they talked about was when people started messing around with the timeline, there were these creatures that looked I think they almost looked like death. We think of death. They would come after you for the same reason, for messing with time. So that's kind of a theme with a lot of science fiction.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably, I'm responding to a comment I haven't read. Sorry. Irish Banshee 1974 says Janeway and her tank top made me think of the movie Alien.
Absolutely.
And I was thinking that's probably deliberate.
Yes.
In that episode where they're being chased by the macro virus, where she goes all Ellen Ripley. It was kind of random in this. It's kind of humorous because she was in her uniform, and then all of a sudden she was action Janeway, and then she beamed back up and she was just back in her uniform.
That was so, to your point, that was so obviously done. Yeah. I just had to laugh because I'm like, wait, what happened? It was just weird.
Right.
I didn't even pick up on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
Changed clothes in the transporter beam.
Yeah. I don't know where they're going with that, but I thought the Loom was cool. Yeah, I thought they were really cool looking creatures. I love the name Loom. I mean, I don't know if that's actually from a loom where you spin thread on, because
Right.
you know in Greek mythology and stuff, time is always thought of as a thread or a thing like the fates. The fates of Greek mythology, one of them weaves the threads of our lives, and one of them cuts the threads of our lives, and one of them measures the threads of our lives. So I wonder why they call these time traveling creatures the loom.
No.
But if nothing else, I perked up because man, it looked good, and it was funny. The drama and Wesley babbling still worked somehow, because he was still doing. He was right on the edge, but his kind of goofy, absent-minded professor was actually still. It's like some of the Doctor Who's.
Yeah.
It worked, and they just held on. It worked just right, so I was cool with it.
And it's not trying to make Wesley like a badass. Like he's still very much like that nerdy kid who's too smart for his own good.
Yeah.
But now he's like a cosmic super nerd kid. And, you know, like he's very much Wesley Crusher.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that episode we always talk about where Q, it was like, here's Wesley as an adult. And he's like, a big hunky scared god guy. And it's like, there's no way.
And it actually makes sense because they already said that not only it was not just that Wesley had these abilities, but Wesley is what we would call a super genius.
Right.
And that makes sense of a job. I mean, he'd be wasting on a starship, but like you said, having to keep all that stuff in his head and all that weird chrome, this and that, and different universes. I thought I did chuckle because it's just funny. Wesley called it the Prime Universe. And of course, in real life that exists, there wouldn't be a Prime Universe. Or actually, frankly, people in the Mirror Universe would probably call us the Mirror Universe.
Right.
But I thought that was kind of funny, but it was interesting. Now, did I miss something? One thing about the Loom, how is it? Are the Loom trying to erase timelines? Or are they there because what they did is destroying timelines and they are coming to feed on the energy of that?
Yeah, it seems to me like when a thread gets pulled, that lets them in, and they're more like, you know, they're just like predators, like they're just carrion eaters, even, you know, like they're just taking advantage. Now we could find out more about them. I would love it if they made communication with them and they weren't just monsters, but that's what it seemed like to me. I did like that scene where like they erase the dude from history and he beams back up, and he's like, well, what about so and so? And they're like, who's that? Never heard of him.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're like, we don't have any record of this person.
That's not a guy. But I did make a comment as they were beaming down, because it was Commander Tysus and Magell, and then just some dude. Like that dude got no chance.
Yeah, right.
No.
Right.
He's dying in 30 seconds.
Speaking of Tysus, I really like that character.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about him. The voice acting is great, but I like his personality. He works. I really liked him in that whole thing. And it's so funny with Star Trek. They're always whipping up some kind of belt or bracelet that just saves you. And then the doctor, whatever he did, here we go with one of his jokes. I'm a doctor, not an assembly line, because he said he was only going to do enough for the landing party or the way team. And then they were it was kind of the effect of them erasing people from the timeline was kind of wild too.
And it made me think a bit of Yesteryear when he beamed back up, and they're like, he's like, where's so-and-so? And they're like, who's that? Kind of like when they beamed up, you know, after and Yesteryear when they came back, and they're like, who's this Vulcan guy with you?
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
But I thought that whole thing was good. And you mentioned the show looking good. I mean, whatever I think of each story of Prodigy, it's a beautiful show.
It is.
It looks great. And that's a fantastic looking planet, and they're fantastic looking monsters. And even all the cosmic stuff where they're jumping through. But the cool thing is, like, you open the vault and there's a time portal, and it still feels like the Gary 7 cloud thing, but just with better special effects. Like, we put that on right after we watched that, and you commented about that it looks like it.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite effects from all of Star Trek was the Gary 7 cloud thing. It just works in the sound.
Right. All right. So we have a few comments. Elaine said, hashtag no slapping Wesley. Matt is the scorekeeper here. He said, so Veronica, Bill, and Elaine are anti-slap. Charles, Keith, and I are pro-slap.
I'm anti-slap. I like Wesley.
Okay. It's just me and Matt slapping Wesley. Irish Banshee 1974 says random red shirt.
Yeah,
which that guy was a random red shirt. And Matt Sweatman says that was horrific when they wiped people out of existence.
I agree.
It's like Year of Hell on Voyager when they had that technology.
Yeah,
so that sort of exists in Star Trek already.
Yeah.
But this is like a naturally occurring version of it, which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
And before the Loom were finally shown, like I said, the only thing about the holograms that did kind of work was when it was actually generally kind of spooky. is when you saw the tendrils come through the ship and everybody froze, and that sound, and it was going after the hologram Gwen, and then they actually had to turn the hologram back off. That was actually cool. I think they did a good job of building up to that. And to what you said again earlier, Charles, I'm thinking if I had watched this like the week before and let that sink in for a whole week instead of watching it back to back to back, maybe the buildup would have been even better. But I thought that was really cool because that was really wild the way they did that.
Yeah. I like the wait. Like even after we watched episode 9 and Bronco's like, next one. And I was like, but it's a cliffhanger. We need to give it some time so we can experience the cliffhanger. She's like, nope.
Another good scene is when they were running on the planet from the loom. And we talking about how beautiful it is. Man, that shot of the ship in the sky and the phasers firing was just wonderful. That was so cool. Love it.
I still always get annoyed when those ships are in the sky. It happens on every Star Trek show now, and every time I'm like,
you mean coming down to the atmosphere?
Yeah, it shouldn't be in the atmosphere. It should be up in space.
Well, they wouldn't have to be. And if you're talking about Janeway with the combination alien / Die Hard moment, you mentioned, Charles, about communicating. Remember one point she basically says something to the effect of, well, if I can't communicate with you guys, I'll basically do it the old-fashioned way. So I know how to get your attention in the meantime.
Yeah, I did like seeing action Janeway.
Yeah.
Because she's very much an action captain. And I like that she's a little bit older than she was, but she's still, I mean, she's only a few years off from Voyager. I mean, this is probably within a decade of Voyager.
Right.
Right. She's still very, I did like, backing up a little bit when she was, I still like Admiral Jellicoe. And I like Janeway, because we never really got a whole lot of Janeway having to report into admirals.
Yeah.
Yes.
She was on her own. So I like seeing Jellicoe have to be in charge of her, and I like her being like, "What's that? What's that, Admiral? Can't hear you." Anyways, we're going through a Borg transwarp conduit.
And I also like the fact when they were starting to argue, she called him Edward. Edward? Yeah, she just called him back, which is cool. They're on a first name basis because she's a vice admiral, but still.
True. And they were captains at the same time. They were contemporaries. He's a little bit older than her, but she would have been a captain when he was a captain.
Right.
I'm sure she knew him as a peer. Yeah. But also, I mean, that's just a real easy, quick way to establish that they have a history and they know each other. Yeah.
Agreed.
All right. So we've got some comments here. Matt Sweatman says, I'm going to make Elaine wait for 3 months after we watch Best of Both Worlds Part 1.
It won't be the same because she already knows what happens with Picard.
Yeah. Well, won't give anything away, but also it won't be the same because she'll just watch it on her phone when you're not looking.
Because they've got 3 episodes left in their TNG watch of the season 3.
Yep, and Irish Banshee 1974 says no, like Darth Vader. Then she said she was being the action captain, but I think her mama bear instincts were coming out too.
Yeah,
and that's true. That's one thing about Janeway. Like she was quick to take people in, and people who were rule breakers. I mean, how many times did 7 of 9 go rogue?
Yeah,
right. She took in Neelix and Kess. She took in the Maquis. That sort of was her MO, was bringing people into her little fold and then looking out for them. But I like the same advice that she gave to Naomi Wildman, she repeated in these episodes where she was like, my only 3 rules for being captain, keep your shirt tucked in, whatever the other one is, and don't leave anybody behind.
Always get on the ship.
Always get on with the ship. Don't leave anybody behind. And she believes it. Yes. Put her money where her mouth is.
And her crew seems to work with her well too. I actually like the dynamics of the crew. They didn't add a whole bunch of them plotting against her or something like that. They work, this crew that they put together, especially Commander Tysus. And then the counselor dude who ran off into the tub or whatever that was. Yeah,
I feel like he was the doctor last year. And then they brought in the EMH, and now all of a sudden he's the counselor.
Yeah.
Was he a counselor last year? I remember him being in sick bay and examining people and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I thought he was a doctor, so I was confused about that.
I think just because they brought the EMH back and this guy got demoted to counselor.
Right. And it's so funny, but another Star Trek trope that you have to have. I've said this from day one. Given that the Doctor has futuristic technology for the holo emitter, there's no reason for the holo emitter to be visible. It should be able to be inside the image it projects so that you can't see it. And it also projects a force field. But man, if they don't love hitting that thing to turn him off, it's just amazing. Yeah.
And like Veronica pointed out last week, if you've got the mobile emitter, you can't just disappear and reappear all over the ship with a mobile emitter on. The mobile emitter is emitting you. It's a physical thing.
Yeah.
So he should have to be beaming it around the ship or using the ship's hollow technology to. But you wouldn't just appear somewhere with your mobile emitter on your arm.
Right. And they seem to also, at one point, they seem to have tied it into everything. Because at one point, when Janeway said, when she wanted to see what was up with the holograms, she said, didn't she say turn off all the hollow emitters? And did the doctor go away too at that point?
No, except for the doctor.
Except the mole emitter. Okay, so they did that.
But when there was that glitch in the hollow matrix of the ship, the doctor did vanish. He was in the middle of treating somebody and disappeared and reappeared.
Which I've never got why he would even be tied into the hollow emitter of the ship at any point. It seems like he just used the mole emitter and used the ship only as a backup.
Even when he was in the the ship's holodeck or the ship's hollow systems, you would think the doctor would be a partitioned, like separate technology.
Absolutely.
Like if the holodecks go out, you don't want also your emergency backup doctor to go out as well. Like you need him to function like when nothing else is functioning.
Right.
And then going back to Counselor Gnome real quick, like I think it's a fun idea to have a Tellarite counselor, but I want to see that happen. Like I want to see him counseling someone like in a therapy session as a Tellarite.
Yeah, because what would he say to somebody? Get over it?
Right. Well, you're stupid.
Yeah, because they're all about being blunt and honest.
Maybe if you didn't complain so much, you wouldn't have all these problems.
Argumentative. They always take the opposite side.
Right, arguing. Your therapist arguing with you the whole time. And then it'd be funny if like he could like argue people into like, you know what? That's a good point. You know, he could like take the devil's advocate approach and just argue things with them and make them argue. I think that'd be good.
Yeah.
Well, we ended up on sort of a cliffhanger. They made it to where the protostar landed. I don't think we know like where or when this is yet. They just sort of like popped out of the vortex, and there's the protostar, and there's bearded Chakotay sitting there on the hull.
Yeah,
that was wild. The ship is he the only survivor? Is everybody else just hanging out somewhere?
Well, I think he stole it and left. I think it was just him when he left, or did his Birdman come too?
No, his Birdman came.
Yeah, because he was injured.
He wasn't dead. He was injured.
Right.
So is he dead now, or is he going to pop out?
That's what I wondered.
I'm thinking he's going to pop out.
I hope so. I like that guy.
I hope he remembers Dow and them from before.
Well, I think he will. I commented to Veronica when the show started that they kept the protostar in the opening credits. Because they sort of the protostar blew up at the end of the last season.
Right.
But this has still been a very protostar centered show, even though they haven't been on the protostar this season yet. But I mean, presumably now they're going to be on the protostar with Chakotay.
Yeah, I was getting impatient for Chakotay to show up, so I'm glad we finally see him. He looked awfully serene. Maybe he's just chilling, but he looked like he was just sitting there meditating. But thank God they didn't do the flutes or the pipes or whatever you call them.
Hopefully he wasn't on a vision quest. He wasn't talking to his spirit animal.
Yeah,
he doesn't say a Kuchi Moya.
Yeah, I don't think Robin Belcher would stand for that anymore.
I hope not. Hopefully they've seen people making fun of all that stuff for 30 years and know to steer clear of it. But maybe like now maybe they'll spend a little time serving under Chakotay, and that's where they learn sort of the value of taking orders and things.
Yeah,
I could see Chakotay becoming a mentor to them.
Yeah,
I hope so. And again, we've got what 20 episodes total. So
we're halfway through.
Yeah, so 10 more. That's a long time to do a good arc with Chakotay. So that's what I'm looking for.
And usually their arcs are sort of broken down into like chunks anyway.
Right.
So,
yeah, they seem to be broken down into like 5 chunk segments so far.
So yeah, I mean, still yet to come. We need to figure out why the timeline was changed, but only for Gwen. No one else seems to have any glitching out of time problems. Just Gwen does.
Right.
Although like the protostar not coming back in time would have disrupted all of their lives.
Yeah.
All of season 1 wouldn't have happened.
Yep.
I'm interested to see what's going to go on with Solemn, and see if they can make some sense out of the temporal mechanics. They were talking a big game. Aaron Walke, when he was on the Trek Movie Podcast, was talking a big game about coming up with an all-encompassing theory of Star Trek time travel that made sense to him. And
not what Wesley was explaining.
Well, Wesley was explaining that there are other timelines, but I already knew that.
Yeah. I don't think that I don't think you can make a comprehensive time travel because even if you go back to the original series, because back in the day it was believed you wiped out a timeline. You changed it in history, resorted itself. Nowadays it's the quantum thing where you no matter what you do, like you can go back in history and save Abraham Lincoln from being assassinated. But the reality in which Abraham Lincoln was assassinated still exists. You just spun off a new one where he wasn't. They're saying they're still trying to jump between the two of those. So I'm having a hard time. I'm trying to keep it like you. I'm confused a lot.
Yeah.
And then they give me those stupid bracelets. Then they stand outside of time. So
right. That was kind of cool. I did think like every time the time started slowing down, you had them slowly trying to put like, well, just push it before you go to the weird time place.
Yeah, because the one dude he was slowly, and then he finally got it just in time.
I should have put this closer to my finger. I'm gonna die. All right.
One thing I did say in my notes real quick was I said seriously, everybody but Harry Kim almost is getting used, brought back, or referenced.
Yeah.
And Garrett Wang initially I think was supposed to be brought into, what was the story? He was gonna have some kind of part in Lower Decks, but they told him no because they were gonna do Prodigy. I think that what it was, or the other way around?
Yeah, no, I think it was Picard. They were originally gonna have him show up at that big battle when the entire fleet was assembled for a military parade for whatever reason. That Captain Kim was gonna show up, but I don't know. There's a lot of things that were supposed to happen in that season that didn't happen for various reasons. Right. But I would that's one of those dangling things that Star Trek sort of left undone is that people talk about. Like, I think that would resolve that, just seeing that Kim got promoted. And he's due for like 3 promotions when he gets back.
Absolutely. Because in the Star Trek world now, the only couple of people that you don't see come back or you even hear about are the actors who don't want to. And primarily I'm thinking of Jolene Blaylock as to Paul and Roxanne Dawson as B'Elanna Torres. They're not interested. But man, they've shown Tuvok. They referenced Tom Paris in this episode. They've had Tom Paris. They've had just about everybody, and Harry Kim is left out. That just kind of sucks to me.
Yeah, I'm hoping we'll get now. If they're planning for multiple seasons, they may not want to have all their Voyager characters showing up in one season. Right. So that could be that they had hoped to have Harry Kim down the line, but the Doctor fit into this storyline more obviously more than Harry Kim might have.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got a comment from Matt Sweatman that said Chakotay is slippery in this series. Every time we think he's found.
Yeah.
He's not.
Yeah, but we're going to find out, because after we finish watching this and I get this podcast put out, we're going to go watch episode 11 and find out what happened.
I may have to do that as well.
All right. Well, Keith, where can people find more of you?
You can find me on X and Facebook, primarily the ESO Network Facebook groups.
And how about us, Veronica?
FeltNerdy.com.
Yep. And if you like puppet shows, nerdy puppet shows, follow Felt Nerdy. We're getting geared up for Dragon Con right now, so we're going to have a lot of behind the scenes pictures and things and stuff coming up. And if you're going to be at Dragon Con, come to our shows. We're doing 3 shows at Dragon Con of our own, plus appearing in Puppet Slam. And if you like adult-oriented puppetry that is very much not suitable for kids or for watching at work, you can follow Felt Nerdy and Dirty, which is our adult stuff. We're going to be in a burlesque show August 16th. We'll be doing a routine in that. That's the Sinful Variety show at the Red Light Cafe in Atlanta. We've just submitted a date for our next show of our own, which will be in October. We'll be announcing that coming up. But also we're doing an adult-oriented Star Trek show at Dragon Con. So follow Felt Nerdy and Dirty and the Felt Nerdy and Dirty YouTube because we've got some more adult-oriented video from our most recent show that we just did. Where else can people find us?
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
That's right. And you have a closing for us?
The word you're looking for is groovy.
Perfect. That's perfect.
I like that.
Well, join us next Thursday. We'll be talking about episode 11 to 15 of Star Trek Prodigy Season 2. We will watch that over the course of this week. Please don't post any spoilers about them in our. We're turning off the entire internet. I'm erasing it from the timeline, trying to stay spoiler free. But we go live on Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern. Or if you miss it, you can watch the replay on YouTube, or you can listen to this on your favorite podcast platform. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks all.
Bye.